accept, what Greta's saying and
As
to go along.
the new wisdom for
yeah.
everyone to worship. Yeah. We all can live with being treated as pests because that's just what we breathe, and that's what we have to do to make sure that our terraqueous orb survives.
Right.
And well, it just goes to show, I mean, in so many different levels, there is a kind of incorporated charlatanry where mumbo jumbo is weaponized as expertise that's settled and irrefutable and based on high percentage consensus. Because what is the thing? The IPCC, 97% consensus of the best scientists in the world.
Well, I have another clip on that note. The IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, right? And this is like who everyone delegates their brain cells to in government. And this is local, folks.
Mm-hmm.
If you live...
It trickles all the way down.
It trickles all the way down. Just look it up on your county's website. They're all participating in some form of sustainability program or some shit like that.
And the more quote unquote progressive the area is, the more thoroughly entrenched the system is.
But when you start talking to people in your local government and you start to peel back the onion of bureaucracy that this is, and the psychology of those people who are in a sense, implementing it, locally for you,
for your own
in
good.
your service,
for your own good.
They will invariably at some point start talking about the IPCC and the scientists who staff it, etc. And so, if you're not familiar with the obvious, fallacy of that, we've got another good clip for you.
The idea that humans are heating the planet dangerously is due mostly to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, United Nations body supposedly made up of top climate experts. This IPCC is what the government listens to most.
There's a group of scientists called the International Panel on Climate Change, 4,000 of them. Guys in white coats who run around and don't have a sense of humour. They just measure things. And what they say to us is that it's happening and it's caused by human activity.
But Donna Laframboise, a Canadian journalist, has checked just who writes these IPCC reports and published the results in a new book, The Delinquent Teenager Who Was Mistaken for the World's Top Climate Expert. Donna, thanks for joining me. Is the IPCC really made up of 4,000 top scientists?
Well, that's a fairy tale that politicians really like to believe in, but in fact, that's a very, very problematic number. The last big IPCC report was written by 450 lead authors with an additional 800 secondary authors. That comes to 1,250. That's a pretty big far cry from 4,000. So first of all, the number is problematic. And secondly, is it 4,000 of the world's top scientists? Well, I'm afraid it's not. I found out that some of the people writing this report are actually graduate students in their 20s. They're, some of them 10 years away from even getting their PhDs.
How could that
That's
happen?
not a top scientist. That's, you know what? I'm not sure. I think they just, they didn't get any scrutiny. They really didn't. They said, this is what we're doing, and we're a collection of top scientists, and we all believed them, and no one bothered to double check.
Is it the case then that people were being chosen, some of the examples you give, people who hadn't even done their PhD yet, they're chosen because they agree with the opinion, not because they could prove it?
Well, you know, one suspects that that's what was going on, that in fact people were chosen because they perhaps could be easily led. They were young and could be easily led, perhaps because they had already expressed the kind of opinion the IPCC brass was hoping the report would express. It's not clear, but it certainly looks fishy.
And lastly, we were told that it relies on peer-reviewed science. That doesn't seem to be the case from what you seem to have established.
Well, that's the other thing. That's the other big fairy tale here. The chairman of the IPCC has been going around the planet assuring us that the reports are based only, solely, and exclusively on peer-reviewed science. Well, when I actually decided to check out how many of the sources cited by the IPCC were published in peer-reviewed scientific academic journals, only 2/3 were. And we also discovered that 21 out of the 44 chapters had so few peer-reviewed sources that that chapter would have received an F on a grade school report card.
It seems to me, Donna, what you also found out was a lot we were reviewing on green groups literature, and I think people really should look at what you've come up with, because I think it'll really startle them how thin this material is. Donna Laframboise, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah. So this is, someone who's got some journalistic, investigative scrutiny skills. And she was able to basically unpack the outrageous claim that, the science is crystal clear. Everything is certain. It's settled. 100%. Now pay an extra 20% on your labor to... because of your carbon footprint. Well, I'm glad that she was able to debunk a lot of that and excavate the lack of substance, ultimately, to the claims in these IPCC reports. And I just think that you see this narrative morph over time, with all these buzzwords and this kind of suffocating formalism around... how no one can really question the methods or the outcomes of said evidence or consensuses because they don't have the quote-unquote approved credentials. Well, it doesn't take, clearly it doesn't even take a PhD to write what's supposedly subtle science. So
Right.
It's just...
So what's all the hubbub about having a degree if...
Right.
The top scientists in the world can not have one?
Right. So
10 years from a PhD? Are you serious?
Whoa. That's pretty excessive. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, ultimately people are wanting to gesticulate about political convictions and passions, but they need this veneer of authority to lend their opinions legitimacy. So that's why they glom on to all these different NGOs and these movements that want them to peddle a certain line. They want a certain opinion reinforced as though it's fact.
Right.
And that's why they have to source all these, young zealots, basically.
Right.
Just to add to this gestalt that, this is a growing serious matter because, people are able to regurgitate all of the talking points in a like fashion, and that's what makes it settled, essentially.
Well, Xavier, you have a way with words, and you can talk a lot, and you can provide your opinion, but I don't hear you talking a lot about evidence. And so I think we might want to spend some time.
Oh yeah, let's look at what constitutes evidence. That's awesome.
So this is climate.nasa.gov, which if you guys listening out there, if you have any family members who work for NASA, have you asked them what they do? Have you asked them what kind of spaceships or new spacefaring technology they've been working on directly? If you haven't, I would recommend you try to do that. Because I would bet 90% of the time, you're going to get an answer about climate.
Yeah.
And you're going to get an answer about monitoring weather. And you're going to get answers like that. Because NASA is really not a space exploration company like they promote themselves to be. No. They are more of a front PR sort of legacy vestige of the Nazi paperclip operation. Disney science fiction industrial complex.
Right.
Right.